everybody, my name is Luke Marr and this is Hot Mode, and today on Hot Mode we are going to be talking about why fast fashion is so disgusting. Yes, your Fashion Nova, Forever 21, IMG of the label, and Zara clothing is despicable, it's gross, and it's just really cruel. But it's not for the reason that you think. Now, before we get any further into the video, if you guys are looking for a channel that talks about fashion in the most fun, sassy, bitchy, analytical way, this is it. So you can go down below, hit the subscribe button, and turn on my post notifications. Like, what do you have to lose? You're literally here already. Also, if you guys want to see more from me, you can follow me on Instagram at Hot Mode. I post some pretty poppin' fashion memes, and my Instagram stories are always spilling the tea and giving you the best updates in the industry. I literally vet everything that goes in my stories, so you're only seeing the most important things. And with that, let's get back into the video. I just want to say that this video is not going to be perfect. It's not going to cover every topic I want it to cover, but if you guys are interested in learning more and just learning from the most immediate source that I got all my information from, a movie called The True Cost, which is on Netflix, essentially details everything wrong with the fast fashion industry and really gives you a really awful, sad, and horrific look into what fast fashion is doing to us as a people, doing to other people, and doing to the environment that we live in. So, as I've already said, fast fashion is gross, but it's really gross because the ways companies go about designing, producing, and selling their clothing. Fast fashion has killed thousands, it's hurt small and independent fashion brands, it's contributed to global pollution in an astronomical way, and recently it has been deemed as a modern form of slavery. Yeah, I bet you all just thought I was gonna say it was really ugly. I'm not that shallow. The reason that the title of the video is so harsh is because I really want to draw attention to something that is so cruel and despicable and something that we just don't even think about. But hopefully, if consumers like us are armed with the knowledge of how the industry works and how we can change it, we can actually change the way that the businesses operate, we can change the way that we as a society view clothing, and we can literally save thousands of lives. Now let's actually define fast fashion though, so when we see it, we'll know it. Merriam-Webster defines fast fashion as an approach to the design, creation, and marketing of clothing fashions that emphasize making fashion trends quickly and cheaply available to consumers. The key words in that definition are quickly and cheaply. I also think it's good that we identify some of the most popular fast fashion brands. Here are a few of the most well-known fast fashion retailers: Zara, H&M, Uniqlo, Forever 21, Topshop, Gap, Pull & Bear, Mango, Bershka, Fashion Nova, Urban Outfitters, Primark, River Island, Charlotte Russe, and Other Stories, Cause, and Next, just to name a few. Now that we know what fast fashion is and who actually makes it, let's get into why it's actually so bad. I'm gonna use this fashion production cycle graph as a guideline. And let's say that we, all together, wanna make a navy blue t-shirt. Another really important thing that we don't really think about is how clothing is actually made. I think a lot of the times we just assume it ends up magically in a store and then we buy it and we don't really think about how a piece of clothing, let's say something like this t-shirt, is actually produced. So I'm gonna use this fashion production cycle graph as a little guideline for how clothing is produced. And let's say that we're gonna make a navy blue t-shirt. Simple, right? Well, first up is raw materials. This constitutes the growing of materials that are turned into clothes. So that could be cotton, wool, linen, jersey knit, polyester, which if you didn't know is literally made from coal and petroleum oil. So you're covering your body in coal and gas that you put into your car. But for the sake of easiness, let's say that our shirt that we're making is cotton. So cotton must be grown on a farm. Well, one of the companies named Monsanto since the 1950s has patented the majority of cotton seeds in the world. Essentially, Monsanto is a monopoly and can raise the price of seeds to whatever they want because they are the only ones that actually sell a certain type of cotton seed. Farmers all over the world usually must pay steep prices for these cotton seeds, and that normally puts them into debt. The other problem is these plants usually require a mass amount of pesticides to keep them growing, which is usually sprayed not only by people working in fields, but also by planes that distribute the pesticides through the air, which can lead to the pesticides going not only in the fields, but to different regions around the fields as well. These pesticides have been proven to cause cancer, physical disabilities, and mental disabilities. Unfortunately, the workers in the fields also can pass these issues on to their children. And on top of that, many farmers are so in debt to Monsanto that they actually can't afford to care for themselves or their children, which unfortunately means that they must accept watching not only themselves but also their children dying. Yeah, the video is not exactly the most positive one that I've ever done. Another thing to consider is that plants take time to grow. They don't just grow like that. But in the fast fashion cycle, the growth of plants is expedited, which isn't healthy. The next step is taking the raw materials and spinning, weaving, and knitting them into fabrics. So we're gonna take a piece of cotton and turn it into a piece of yarn, and that's actually a skill. You must be able to remove the seeds from the cotton, you must be able to keep the thread at a consistent size, and you have to learn how to use multiple machines to actually make this all happen. Once you have the thread though, which is not easy or quick to make, it must be woven to actually create the fabric. Weaving is a whole nother skill that takes a lot of labor and time and isn't always done by machines. I can barely thread a fucking needle, so let me just say, actually making and spinning raw materials and then weaving them, it's a whole lot of work that I didn't even realize. There are things called mills, which are where the fabrics are actually produced. A little history lesson. In the United States, before there were child labor laws, mills usually employed young children because they could actually fit their hands into different machines to work out any problem. But in the countries where fast fashion and regular fashion pieces are made, young women are still being utilized, and there aren't many labor laws to actually protect these young workers. For example, in January of 2018, one of the mills used by Hugo Boss was keeping its female workers locked up in the factory and in its attached hostels. The young women were not allowed to leave, and anytime they tried to contact their families, who often lived far away, they were monitored by the security teams for the factories, which is a form of modern-day slavery. Another thing that we don't think about is that the workers in these mills can often lose limbs in machinery, they can go deaf from the noise exposure, and they can contract respiratory problems from the inhalation of fibers. The next step is bleaching, dyeing, or printing the fabric that's going to make our t-shirt, so we need it to be navy blue. So bleach is pretty self-explanatory. It's a cleaning product used all over the world. Oftentimes, you don't want it to touch your skin, and to ingest it is fatal. Yet, we put bleach products on our largest organs, aka the skin, without even thinking about it. The pores on our skin actually open and absorb the chemicals. So if we don't want to drink bleach, why do we want to put it all over our bodies? Dyeing is a little more aloof. So our navy blue t-shirt, she's kind of a bitch. It's reported that 10 to 15% of the dyes in the dyeing process do not actually bond to fabrics, and they often end up in the wastewater stream. Oftentimes, this contaminated water can kill wildlife and affect crops, essentially poisoning both animals and human beings. But also, let's think about just how toxic the dyes actually are. Oftentimes, workers in factories are in very close proximity to these dyes. And remember what I said about the pores of your skin absorbing different chemicals? Well, that happens with dyes as well. Something awful is that when the skin absorbs these dyes, it can actually create tumors all over the body, and other significant health effects as well. Reportedly, 40 to 50,000 tons of dye is discharged into the global water system currently. The next step is design. In the past, fashion is ran on two different cycles: fall, winter, and spring, summer. Easy enough, right? Well, in the age of fast fashion, there are actually 52 different fashion cycles, one for each week of the year. Designers used to actually have time to cultivate a vision for their collections. But fast fashion is so fast, the designers of fast fashion companies often have to look to the runways for trends that they can recreate. In the US at least, fashion is deemed as a utility, and you can't patent or copyright any different designs. For luxury fashion houses and their creative directors, this is just a way of life, and it doesn't affect them that much. But for small and independent fashion brands, a copied piece could literally put them out of business. And we have seen time and time again that young and independent brands and artists fall victim to this. And unless public shaming by accounts like Diet Prada are enacted, Literally nothing can be done to stop it. The most important step in the fast fashion cycle is production. It's where our t-shirt will actually be made by workers in factories in third world countries. Now, fast fashion is so desirable because of the two main words that we talked about in the definition: quickness and cheapness. I mean, that's really the reason that we shop there, right? Well, let's say our production factory is in Bangladesh, which is right about here. And because we need to be competitive in the market, we need our t-shirt to actually be made for $4. Yeah, $4. I can barely sew, but I imagine that if you're making hundreds of t-shirts a day with an amazing amount of skill in making t-shirts, I'd want to get paid more than a few dollars a day. Let's say that the owner of the factory that we want to work with says, no, that's too cheap, I can't do it. We can say, okay, we'll just find another factory, essentially making that factory lose a really big order and client. Yes, client. Fast fashion companies don't actually own factories, they just contract them. Because if they actually owned them, they'd have to be responsible for their upkeep and the way that their workers were treated. The fact that these factories are actually independent contractors is just a cheap trick used by these big fashion companies in order to get out of so much. Let's say that the owner of the factory that said, no, that's too cheap, eventually gives in to the $4 price point. Because if he doesn't, his family will starve. And so will his employees and their families. So the prices are so low, but he can't have his workers skimp too much on the quality of the garments. So he makes them work longer hours, he reduces their pay, he squashes unions and strikes with violence. His workers live in slums and they will barely be able to feed themselves and send money home to their families. But the most concerning thing he does in order to keep that price at $4 is he does not upkeep his factory. I mean, how can you pay to fix the cracks in the wall when you can barely pay your employees? Well, on April 24th, 2013, the way fast fashion operates came to a head. The Rana Plaza factory in Bangladesh collapsed. Around 2,500 people were non-fatally injured. Those injuries ranged from minor injuries to the loss of multiple limbs in the collapse. But 1,134 people did not survive the building's collapse. And this isn't the first or only building collapse due to fast fashion's push on the garment industry. Yes, 1,134 people died in order to make our navy blue t-shirt. Now, I could continue on with our fashion production cycle graph. We could talk about how recycling and donating our clothes has literally destroyed the garment industry in the continent of Africa. We could talk about our throwaway culture and our constant purchasing and a bunch of other things that we do that just aren't healthy. But I also want to address that I'm not blaming anybody watching this video who has ever bought fast fashion or anybody who still has to buy fast fashion. I'm not perfect at all, I've done my part and I bought from those stores. I also understand if you need to purchase from places like this. I am not gonna cast the first stone, none of us are perfect. And for anybody who now looks at fast fashion in a very different way, I have a few methods you can use to combat your own fast fashion habits. The first one is to try to consume less. You don't need new clothes every 2 weeks. So try to limit yourself on how many times you shop at fast fashion retailers and just shop for clothing in general. Another great resource is to buy vintage. Thrift stores are a great way to get more budget-friendly pieces that are extremely unique. If you don't have a thrift store in your local area, you can use different apps like Depop, Grailed, Poshmark, The Real, just to name a few. And if you have any pieces in your wardrobe that you know you don't like right now, there's always a way to repurpose them. That's something that I've done since I was literally like 13. Cut up t-shirts, try different methods. There's always a way to make the clothing that you have look just a little bit better. The next one is to shop from sustainable retailers. Patagonia, Everlane, Reformation, Peepletree, Pact for basics, Raven and Lily, just to name a few. They're not as cheap as places like Zara or H&M, but we also have to realize that clothing shouldn't cost that little. Another great way is to shop your local and independent designers and artists. Lisa Says Ga is a really great site with brands like Donnie, Paloma Wool, Rachel Antonoff, and Lisa Says Ga's eponymous label. My final and most important way to combat your fast fashion habits is to realize that you're never going to be perfect. But neither am I. Nobody is ever going to be. But trying to unlearn the harsh and deadly hold that fast fashion has on us is a great step in the right direction. I know this video isn't perfect and it doesn't hit every single point, but doing just a little bit helps to change the world. And with that, that is about as preachy as I'm gonna get. So I hope you enjoyed, I hope you learned a lot. I will see you guys on Thursday's video. Thank you so much for watching, and TTYL.